Okay. All right, everybody. Welcome to this edition of our SWOG webinar. We've been very lucky to have David join us from Bron Haul in Wales. We've been chatting quite a long time about this, and we've had a few meetings along the way, haven't we, David? And basically, today's the day that it all comes together, all your hard work. So without further ado, I'll pass you over to David, and you can perhaps do a better introduction because you know yourself better than I do.
Hi, that was very brief, Sarah. Who am I? I'm David Brown. I've been managing a woodland in North Wales for the last 30 years. In fact, slightly longer than that. So the holding here is called Bron Haul. That translates pretty much as sunny bank, which is pretty unimaginative, I guess, but it is a big south-facing bank. And I and others started planting broadleaf trees, mostly broadleaf, mostly site-native trees here in about 1994. The holding is actually a small farm. It used to be a mixed tenanted dairy farm. When I say dairy farm, I think they used to milk 8 cows here, which was pretty usual in this part of Wales at that time. But I acquired the land in 1994 and started planting trees. There's a picture there of very typically the sort of tree planting that we've done here over the years. That's in a patch of bracken land. There's quite a lot of bracken and gorse on the holding, or there was historically. And our method of planting was very conventional. Our biggest threats here are rabbits and fallow deer. And so our method of planting really generally has been deer fencing and then using tubex guards and planting in 60-centimeter tubex guards. I love planting in bracken. Bracken is a wonderful place, a wonderful opportunity for tree planting. The woodland flora tends to be there waiting, ready for the woodland. So you've got your bluebells and your bugle and a whole suite of woodland flora just waiting for the trees. That is the same site probably a couple of years post-planting. And then below, you've got me taking off a tree guard. That's something that we try and do here. Try and use second-hand tree guards where we can, usually do. And we usually take them off while they can still be taken off. So probably year 3 or year 4. And that starts us off on a journey of continuous cover silviculture, which I think is what I'm talking about today, hopefully. Are we all happy with what we're talking about with continuous cover? I don't suppose we are, because nobody in the industry is. Nobody really has a settled definition of continuous cover, other than to say there should always be trees on site. Though even that isn't accepted, because other people talk about shelter woods or fairly, what I would consider to be quite large clear fell coops within continuous cover. And that isn't what I would consider to be continuous cover forestry. What I consider to be continuous cover forestry is really perhaps better defined as continuous harvest forestry, in that there should always be trees on all the woodland, which are, once continuous cover is established, there should always be a harvest there to be taken. And the first requirement for that is to have quality stems within your woodland, to have stems which are worth the effort of continuous cover forestry. And that is achieved through silviculture. So going back to me taking off my tree guard there, at that time, that is where we would start formative pruning. So that's a real opportunity when you're taking the tree gut off to make sure that your tree has a strong leader, take off any strongly competitive branches. That's usually defined as over a third of the diameter of the stem at the point where the branch meets the stem. So if you've got a branch which is stronger than that, then it needs to come off at that stage. And there's a little example of a pruning scar. That gives you some idea of the way pruning should be done. So you don't, when you've got a tree, you've usually got this branching scar. Are you seeing the cursor on that, Sarah? Yeah. So you've usually got that branching scar there, and you don't want to cut into that. In fact, your pruning cut wants to mirror that angle the other way. And if you get that right, you won't have left a peg, you won't have left somewhere to hang your coat there, and you'll get that lovely donut of callousing material, which is a sign that your pruning has been correct. And pretty much whatever the size of your pruning wound, it will completely have healed over within 3 or 4 years. As your tree grows, you continue pruning, either high pruning or formative pruning. So once you've got a strong leader, you've got a strong stem like this, then that's the time to be getting your pole saw out and making sure that that stem is pretty much branch free, knot free, to produce high quality knot free timber. There's a stand. That's a stand that was planted in 1996. And that thinning operation there, which is what's left us with that very open looking woodland, that was after a thinning operation, probably about year 22 within that woodland. So 2016. So that is essentially, I think, what you need if you're going to start continuous cover. Is you need to have a choice of clean, knot-free stems, healthy trees, balanced crowns. Here we're doing this with native broadleaf, which has a lot of advantages, but the same process could be done with conifer. And if you've got conifer, then that's what you're starting with. So having achieved this state, then you're looking for the other benefits that you want from your woodland. So you want biodiversity. You want that ground flora layer, which is what you can achieve if your thinning means that you get this lovely diffuse light on the forest floor. So you get hopefully a rich flora going, but also some natural regeneration in there. So behind the bluebells there, you've got a coppice stool of sweet chestnut. That picture above, I think, is showing a bit of cherry regen. And ultimately, what you're aiming for is a woodland with structural diversity. So you want various layers within the woodland. You want a floral layer on the floor. You want some young trees, always to have young trees within your woodland. Hopefully then an intermediate layer, a sort of shrub layer, but also some regeneration that's going away, and then some young trees which are going to replace your selected stems when you harvest them. So that is the aim, is to get that structure and that age range within the woodland and your quality stems well established. And what you'll find is that there's lots of things against you when you're doing that. There are lots of threats. So this is a little slide showing threats. I don't know if you're familiar with these. The biggest threat to woodland in Wales anyway is livestock. It's always, if you've got damage within your woodland, probably the first thing to look for is livestock. This is one of my cows actually. This is Katie, and she's outside the woodland, and that's where she stays for almost all the time. I've got a small suckler herd here, but there's a little example of threats. Start over here, squirrel damage. Anyone who's trying to grow broadleaf timber will know that grey squirrels, unless you have the great benefit of not being in the grey squirrel area, if you're up there in the north of Cumbria or in Scotland, you won't be familiar with this, but this is very typical of what we see in woodland around here. All this bark has been stripped off this young sapling. It's a sweet chestnut, I think. And unless we're doing squirrel control, we won't grow any timber. The method we use, there's one of our live traps, multi-catch live traps on a little platform. That's our method of controlling grey squirrels. It works for us. Got some some wildlife cameras in the woods, and this is a deer that's spotted the wildlife camera. Is quite interested in what's going on. The next slide shows the sort of damage that fallow deer do around here, which is basically browsing all our regen. And so for us, either we exclude deer with fencing or we shoot the deer, which is a lovely non-timber forest product, but maybe not to everyone's choice. What we find is that fencing has its limitations. Where we have deer fenced areas, we have some areas that aren't deer fenced, but some areas that are deer fenced, we tend to get incursions of deer occasionally, particularly during the rut. And so the fallow deer population around here needs control. There's another little threat in the top right hand corner there is ants. So either people are familiar with ant damage or they don't know what we're talking about. But we have mounding ants within the young woodland, and as soon as the tree is planted, they decide that the tree shelter makes a lovely high-rise solar collector for them, and they'll fill our tree shelters with soil, and that will kill a tree as well. So that's another. So essentially, within your woodland, you've got to be aware of your threats, the threats to your woodland, and you've got to try and get ahead of them. Not quite what that picture at the bottom with me with my pole saw is supposed to show, but there we are. That's just a quick run through of the threats that we're suffering here. And then if those things are dealt with, then hopefully you get into products. Here's a slide just illustrating some of the products that we've had out of the woodland here. Start at the top. Charcoal. Charcoal is a lovely product that almost all woodlands can produce. It's great fun to make. It's lovely, filthy work. We've never really made it pay, but it's great fun, and it gives you something to do with your early products. Below there is a hazel basket. In the early days of the woodland here, one of the few crops that we had was hazel rods, and so we got into hazel basketry and had a lot of fun with that. And then as the woodland has matured, we've got into cleaving wood, making cleft wood hurdles, and more recently cleft chestnut fence posts as well. Firewood's a big one. That's a stack of firewood that took me a couple of months to build and went onto that lorry in about 5 minutes, which was a bit salutary, but nevertheless, yeah, where we are, we've got a good wholesale market for firewood, and we wholesale 50 or 75 tons, 2 or 3 lorry loads of firewood a year. Non-timber forest products, I've mentioned the venison. we also, if we succeed in controlling the grey squirrel sufficiently, that we actually managed to secure a nut harvest. We've got quite a nut harvest here, walnuts and hazelnuts, plums within the woodland as well. More recently, that's us tanning a deer hide, using the oak bark to tan a deer hide to produce a bit of buckskin, which is a lovely sort of circular use of resources within the woodland. Above there's a picture of a yurt made by some friends of ours. We supplied the hazel sticks, which they peeled to make that, but also the door there is made from some cherry timber out of the woods here. So in a woodland which is only at that time 20 or 22 years old, we started planking some timber. We started to take some of the thinnings to our local sawmill, and we're getting some planked wood, some cherry and some ash and some sweet chestnut. Sweet chestnut, though I guess it isn't a site native timber around here, is a lovely timber, and it fits in pretty well, I think, with a mixed broadleaf woodland. That's someone commissioned, I think there was 4 styles that we made a couple of years ago, and then there's the split chestnut down the bottom here, which is a wonderful product from a young woodland, and there seems to be an almost infinite demand for split chestnut fence posts. Yeah, we haven't got that much chestnut, but we do sell about 1,000 split chestnut posts a year. And on the sidebar there's a little gate also. Got a bit of larch in the woodland, and that is making some very nice sawn timber for gate making. And another thing, next slide is about the learning process, the learning that we've done, but also the learning that we try and share with other people. The picture is a little cabin that we've built in the woodland using timber from the woods. That's a project that we've really enjoyed doing, and really demonstrate the use of small diameter broadleaf timber that it can make floorboards and stairs and kitchen units, but also structural timber, floor joists, and kitchen worktops and that sort of thing. But also at the moment we have a young woman here called Harriet, who's here under the forestry routes, the RFS forestry routes scheme. We're employing Harriet as a trainee woodland manager, and really enjoying sharing knowledge with her. I also run small woodland management courses. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, if I may.
Of course.
But I also, 5 years ago, completed a distance learning master's degree with Bangor University, Masters in Forestry. And amongst other things in that, I was looking at the greenhouse gas consequences of turning sheep grazed grassland into woodland. So that's that table at the top. And the graph at the bottom is a prediction of when, I went backwards, when I expect timber trees to reach target diameters. So target diameter that we talk about here is 50 centimeters diameter at breast height, if that's a measure that people are happy with. And hopefully the earliest trees should be achieving that sort of diameter in sometime in the first half of the 2030s. So I feel that demonstrates that silviculture can achieve quite quick results in broadleaf woodland. Right, so that is me. That's my contact details. As you'll have gathered, sitting in front of the screen is not my natural habitat. I'm quite uncomfortable doing this.
I think you've done
dashed
well,
through
David.
dash through that fairly quickly because it's going to be much more interesting. Hopefully you've all got questions, and I can start, instead of just wittering on, I can start maybe having a bit of discussion with you all. I haven't even said welcome and all that sort of thing, have I? Thank you very much for turning up on this webinar. It's lovely to have an opportunity to talk to SWOG, and thank you, Sarah, for organising this.
No, not a problem. Thank you so much for giving your time, David. It's people like you that keep the community informed and knowledgeable. So no, thank you for taking the time. But I do think we have some questions, and I think, yeah, let's have a look. So Lara at the beginning of the talk said her main concern, having mature, so an 80-year-old dense trees, is that if I just do an even thinning, there won't be enough light for regeneration. Happy if it's covered later on. It's not really. Laura, could you clarify what you mean by that? I apologise. I don't quite get the gist.
Yes, thank you so much. So I have an about 80-year-old woodland, which is quite dense. And one of the suggestions I was given is to fell the larch, which is throughout, and leave continuous cover of the broadleaf. But I'm afraid that at the moment I have little regeneration from trees because there isn't enough light. And if I just pluck a tree here and there won't still be enough light for regrowth. So I'll just lose tree but not replace them. So the other suggestion I was given is to open some maybe 10 by 10 meter opening to allow more light, and I don't really know what works best.
Where is your woodland, Laura?
It's in the Chilterns near Amersham.
And you don't have a problem with Phytophthora in your larch at the moment, hopefully?
Hopefully not. I did see one larch that had a borer in it, but it's the only one that I've seen ever. So far I'm treating that as an isolated incident.
Lovely. It is so difficult to give advice without seeing the woodland. I imagine that your woodland is heavily stocked by the sound of it. So the woodland floor is pretty bare.
It depends where. I have patches where I've done that clearing last year, opening a couple of areas, and now I have so much foxglove and regeneration, but very few deers because of the deer and the hares. I hope this is not boring for everyone else. Hopefully this resonates with you. And then I have an area that I haven't touched, which is fairly bare on the ground, and I have forestry commission telling me I should fell the larch, and I'm worried that it's going to be either sycamore only if I don't do anything and monoculture, or it's not going to regrow if there isn't enough space for enough light on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, so you've got larch. What else have you got in the mix there?
About 15 species of broadleaves.
Right.
There's cherry, which is now starting to come towards end of life. A few old silver birches. There's beeches. One and not much more. Elder tends to die off. Same thing. As soon as it grows a little bit to maybe 2-3 meters, the deer topple it. And then there's a few other ones. There's chestnuts along the bridle way. There's quite a few trees. I think there's 12 or 15 species there actually. And there's of course ash, which we felled in part, and in part is still there, and that's a different story, as everyone here knows.
Yeah, I mean, I think really I'm exceeding my knowledge here if trying to give advice specifically about this woodland without seeing it. I think that the key thing is that probably your little clear fells are too small. I think conventionally the idea is that your patches that you clear, the diameter of the patches that you clear should be twice the height of the trees around it. So if your trees are what, 25 meters or something like that, then you're looking, if you want to get sufficient light in there for good regeneration, especially of species like oak and cherry, then probably you're looking for something like 50 meters diameter of
Wow.
And if you do less than that, then you probably won't have enough light. but you know, don't take my word for that, because you're in danger then of breaking up your canopy and getting some wind some wind blow. So yeah, I would be very cautious. But if you are trying to get regen in there, then bigger patches.
Thank you. Very clear.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Lara. Ian asks, now that if your woodland is established, would natural regeneration or the structure of your woodland remove or reduce the need for planting and the use of tree tubes?
Yeah, I mean, I started off by saying that I've always planted in plastic guards and at 2,500 stems per hectare. And that really is just what I've always done and what I learned to do. And I am very interested in the idea of natural regen for colonizing greenfield sites. But I've never done it, and I'd like to do more of it. But once your woodland is established, then really you shouldn't have any need for planting. And what we found is that we're getting we're doing quite a heavy thinning. In fact, by the time our trees are 25 years old, we're into our third thinning cycle within those coops, and without getting too technical, are people happy with the term basal area within woodlands? Is that something that people are happy with?
If you could just clarify for those of us who don't know, David, if that's all right.
Yeah, I'm going to run through basal area, because basal area, there's a lot of measurements that can be done within woodland, and most of them are pretty irrelevant. But the one that I like to have some idea of is basal area. So if you're happy with the idea of diameter at breast height of an individual tree, so you measure the diameter at breast height, and then from that you can work out the basal area of that tree. And from that, if you sum the basal areas of all the trees in a hectare of woodland, you get the basal area of that compartment in meters squared per hectare. That would be a hugely laborious thing to do, and no one ever does it. But there is a wonderful little tool called a reloscope, and I would encourage you to have a look at a reloscope, which can be a simple. My reloscope is an old library card which I've cut a slot in. But you'll have to look up reloscopes if you're interested. But you can very quickly establish what the basal area of your woodland is just by doing a very quick sweep around with a reloscope. Yeah, that's a very poor explanation of basal area, but if you're interested, look further at basal area. When I do a thinning here, what I'm doing in the third thinning really is looking for my stems with the future, identifying across a hectare of woodland maybe 100 or 120 healthy stems with a good, clear, knot-free, branch-free leg, a balanced crown, trying to maintain the species diversity. I guess I haven't said anything about species diversity. We have got here about, well, I'll run through. We've got oak and ash and cherry and beech and sweet chestnut. And they're probably our main timber species, but we've also got crabapple and rowan and wild pear and holly and yew. So we've got a good mix of species. And then we've got species that we haven't planted. Going back to natural regeneration, we've got sycamore and willow. Alder is another species that we've got quite a lot of here. So when we're doing that thinning, we're looking for 100 and maybe 120 stems per hectare of good healthy trees, and we're looking to maintain that species balance. And we mark those trees up, and then when we're thinning, we basically, for each of those stems with the future, we allow them to go into free growth. So they haven't got any trees impinging on their crowns. In fact, what we're aiming for is to have the crown diameter free of competition plus a third all the way around. So we end up with these trees very well spaced. We're not taking out all the other trees, but each of the favored trees, we are allowing a lot of room. And if you do that, what we're finding is that our basal area comes down to something like 14 square meters per hectare. And after 5 years afterwards, our basal area will have gone up to something like 20 or 21 meters squared per hectare, at which point we'll have another thinning intervention.
We've got another question there, David.
Yeah, I'm wittering on, so go
No,
on.
you're not. No, not at all. Not at all. But Anne asks, on a 20-year-old regen spruce, would pruning still be useful?
Pruning spruce. Yes. Yeah, pruning is always useful. If you want to grow quality timber, then prune it. Yeah, and if you don't prune, then you'll end up with knotty timber and eventually dead knots, which is what Sitka tends to do. The lower branches aren't shed; they're retained, and you get knotty timber. And if you prune them off, then you'll get clean knot-free timber. I would suggest that you concentrate fairly heavily on the stems that you want to keep. So maybe limit your effort to maybe, I'd guess 300, 400 stems per hectare that you would high prune. But yeah, I love high pruning. It's just the best fun.
That's good. Christine has said, I've just put up deer fencing around a mostly clear-felled Sitka commercial plantation. I'm hoping that voles won't be a problem. Rabbits are unlikely. I have numerous self-seeded young oak seedlings from this spring. Will they survive into the 2 years and beyond?
Will they survive? If it's a recent clear fell, then pine weevil is likely to be a problem. Quite often, commercially, people leave a clear fell site for 5 years to allow the weevil population to expand and then dissipate. But I've been involved in a project where we've done a lot of planting in a spruce clear fell site immediately after clear fell, and really not had too much problem apart from the weevil. Things have gone well on that site, and the broadleaf has established really nicely. So yeah, excellent. Go for it.
Ian asks, you didn't mention any diseases as a threat in your woodland. Have you strategically chosen species or provenance to diversify and mitigate this risk? Do you think that continuous cover forestry can help create healthier and more resilient woodlands?
Ian, you said, didn't you? What a
Yeah.
lovely question. Absolutely right. Yeah. Basically, the ethos here is to worry less about tree disease and concentrate on tree health. So yeah, have a diverse mix of tree species and a diverse mix of structure, because our woodlands are under terrible threats. Climate change, increased extreme weather events, novel diseases. You'd give up if you concentrated too much on the threats. So create a healthy woodland, healthy trees, give trees a lot of room, allow them to be healthy, give them a mixture. And at the moment, ash dieback is a big issue in all broadleaf woodlands. But if you've got 8 species or 10 species of tree within your woodland, then to some extent you can accept the loss of it. The idea that we lose ash is a terrible idea, and we mustn't lose ash. But if it does happen that you lose a lot of your ash, then the other trees will compensate. They'll grow in. They'll take advantage of the death. But all our tree species are under threat from diseases of different sorts. Either diseases that we're aware of, or diseases that we know are out there, or diseases that are as yet unheard of. And this is the point of continuous cover forestry, is to create healthy, resilient woodland. I mean, resilience is the buzzword, isn't it? But if you can have age diversity, structural diversity, species diversity, genetic diversity, all those things are going to hopefully give your woodland resilience so that it can overcome threats. That's
same as any a pet population of anything, like I guess, like with humans.
Yeah. Absolutely. The monocropping is a bad idea. Yeah.
Yeah, all your eggs in one basket, eh? Chris says, I know that there's a continuous cover forestry experiment at Devon. I think there's some clever layout for planting the trees so that they can be felled without damaging other trees. Does any of the other swaggers know about this? And he's included a link to it on a map. Has anybody heard of this? I've not heard of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is the very well-known example where everything is laid out in a grid. I think it's divided into squares with an amazing track network, and within each, I don't know how big the squares are, if they're 15-meter squares or something like that. And I can't remember the name of the site now. I heard it described as the people who set this out originally were from a military background. And I think that was the key. It's a very regimented scheme and really interesting, and very, it's been going for a long time. It's well worth a look.
Okay, thank you. Tony asks, what size of woodland would you consider large enough to produce an income large enough to live on? A lot of variables there, Tony.
Yeah. I've got 50 acres here of woodland, 20 acres of grassland. I reckon in just probably another 30 years, I'll be a rich man. I think it all depends on the quality of the resource, doesn't it? That's what woodland, what silviculture should be all about, is continuously improving the resource and the quality of the resource. And 50 acres of high quality mature broadleaf is worth a lot. And the same area of windblown western hemlock is probably just a liability. So it's not about area, it's about silviculture and site and markets. And I consider the woodland here still to be an investment phase. I think it's still costing more than it's making, really, and that's 30 years in.
Christine asks, what do we do about rust and mildew on young oaks? I have grown some at home, but they seem to be badly affected. Can I make them healthy so I can plan them out next year?
Yeah, I think it was Rackman reckoned that oaks have now got American mildew. I think he called it American powdery mildew. And he suggests that oaks are no longer regenerating within woodland. I mean, I think that's incredibly overcooking it. But mildew is a big problem with oak, and he reckons it's a new disease, or a relatively new disease from America. Within the last century. Mildew is all about ventilation, isn't it? So it's all about it's drought stress and not enough air circulation. I mean, that's only from me growing gooseberries, really. But if you give things room and you keep them watered, then you've got a chance. But oak is a really tricky tree to grow, actually.
My neighbours don't seem to struggle. I don't have any light in my garden. Where can I get advice on woodland management? I'm not sure where to start. What are the costs involved in creating a plan? I think David might be able to help you with this.
Well, yeah, that's great. So I'm going to give you little small woodland management courses, a little plug here. I do organise little weekend courses. If you look at the website, they are www.broadleaf Wales. Got a course coming up 21st, 22nd of September. There's a couple of places left on that course if anyone is interested. Advice is really difficult, and it's something that there's a lot of advice on planting. There's lots of encouragement for people to plant woodland, and then it all goes very quiet, and there's very little advice on woodland management. One thing that we've done here is we've got involved in woodland management competitions, which seems like a really odd thing. I thought it was a really odd thing when I started doing it. Got encouraged to go and enter the Royal Welsh Show forestry competition, which is for us in Wales, and subsequently joined the RFS and started entering their woodland management courses. And the great thing about that is that the judging process means that a really experienced forester comes around and looks at your woodland with you. And that's actually a really good way of getting some advice or at least some feedback. As foresters, we tend to be in isolation. We tend to be very isolated. We work away and we don't know what we're doing. And to have a forester come around and tell you what they like about your woodland and where they think you're going wrong, I found that really, really useful. But yeah, advice. It's difficult. I know we've got quite a lot of people who've bought woodlands through Woodlands for Sale who are I really quite like the democratization of woodland ownership, which is happening through Woodlands for Sale. And I know you tend to get a large woodland broken up in small blocks, and those blocks are sold off. If a woodland management, if a group of owners would like to get in touch and would like me to come and visit their site and give some advice, then I'd be very happy to do that. And as another thing that we do here is we encourage volunteers to come and spend a couple of weeks here, do some work and learn about my approach to woodland management here. Yeah, and if anyone wants to get in touch with any inquiries, they'd be very welcome.
David, if you type out that like in a few sentences, like give me some blurb, we can get that put in our newsletter for you, because I think I think plenty of people would be interested in that actually. I'll put that on the social media as well. I think people would be interested.
Okay, I shall do that then, Sarah. Lovely, thank you.
Here's a question from Christine. Has anyone ever used pigs to clear the brush and roots of the felled trees? If so, which breed? Is that something you've ever done, David? Or anybody else? Please feel free to unmute and join in.
I have kept pigs in woodland.
Yeah.
It's remarkable how much soil pigs can move, especially on a slope. And on the flat, it's one thing. Pigs can fell quite big trees on a suitable slope. I'd be very cautious. The pigs I had were large blacks. They loved it. But they did have a pretty big impact. But if you're going to try and use natural regen within a wood, then you need some sort of disturbance event, and pigs are probably as good as anything. I just move them on fairly quickly.
Are you saying they cause more problems, so they'll fix a problem but cause you more?
Any sort of livestock in woodland, I think you've got to be very cautious. Most of our woodlands are already overbrowsed with deer. Even if livestock's excluded, then deer are. So most of our woodlands are already overbrowsed. But pigs, if used carefully and moved on, yeah, great idea.
Yeah, I like the idea of having a pig. I want a piglet though. I'll run it past the family. Ian, the greenhouse gas accounting that you studied, what elevation was that study at? Would the figures be as favourable for higher elevation grassland areas such as upland sheep farming areas?
So the holding here is centred at 500 foot above sea level. goes down to about 300 foot, goes up to about 700 foot above sea level. If you want to grow good trees, then plant them on good land, I'm afraid. And we haven't got any flat land here. I'd love to have a flat woodland. That would be a thing, wouldn't it? But yeah, essentially replacing farting, burping sheep, cattle with trees is, you know, the gains are immense in all sorts of ways, not just greenhouse gases, but in all sorts of ways.
So Chris asks, what percentage of trees would have been thinned after 30 years? Chris, is that in relation to David's woodland?
Yeah, in terms of numbers, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I think you answered it after I asked it with talking about spatial areas. So yeah, you kind of covered it, but in a different way.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, spatial area is a really useful measure. Like I say, get a telescope and have a go. But yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating thing, is that we're encouraged to plant 2,500 stems per hectare. And if we take those through to maturity, we're probably left with, and if it's oak, they talk about 70 or 60 stems per hectare. So, yeah, you're over the 80 years of a rotation, you'd be taking out, you know, in excess of 95% of your trees, wouldn't you? And by the time we're at 30 years old, then probably I never thought of it in these terms, but certainly taken out, I don't know, 60-70% of the planted stems at that stage.
Okay. Back to those pesky pigs. I was reading the questions chronologically, but now I'm reading them just in relevance, I suppose. Chris says, suppose you could try mob grazing of pigs in woodland, so restricting them to small areas at a time. And Anne says she has a friend in Nottinghamshire who rents out her pigs to clear ground, which is good because my woodland's in Nottinghamshire. So, Anne, I'll message you. So other things, Christine says, I have a thin layer of soil and then it's clay. There was an ancient woodland on the site before the commercial plantation in the 80s. Will a variety of trees cope with this soil and the clay?
Most UK broadleaf species are extremely tolerant of different sorts of sites. It depends how much, I would say it depends how much damage was done. So we talked about a poor site here. I imagine we talked about it a Clearfell site, are we?
Christine?
Sorry, what did you ask? The whole site?
Is it a Clearfell site that you've got, or?
Yeah, it's about 9.5 acres, and I have got a nice sort of corridor of birch, which I can keep, which is fab. So I do have some trees left on it. But then obviously the conifer plantation hadn't really been managed, and so it was too dense, and then there was a lot of wind blow in Storm Marek, and then therefore it was a decision I had to make that it was clear-felled. So yeah, it's clear-felled, but it's regenerated a lot, so there's a lot of birch coming through. But like one of the contributors said, I want to sort of do this kind of mob thing, you know, so about 6 pigs and then move them like around and get it done. But it's this business of the fact that it's so much clay. It is a flat site, and there are ditches which are there, but I'm just a bit worried about that. Like the Sitkas had such shallow roots, you know.
So what's the site elevation?
Oh, I don't know about the elevation. It's in the Mains, so it's not. It's above sea level, but it is flat. So you kind of like you've got the sea on the east coast, and then you're over the hills, and then I don't know what the elevation is. I'm sorry, 200 meters. I don't know.
Yeah,
no, I don't know.
Tricky. The effect of conifers on soil is really interesting. good thing to do to dig a few pits and have a look at your soil. There is this terrible thing that can happen, which is called podsilization, where you end up, if you especially Western hemlock, but also with spruce, where you end up with quite a deep O horizon, so an organic horizon on the surface, which is really undecayed needles, and below that a really grey soil, which is where the term podsil comes from, where a lot of your cations basically have been leached through your soil, and at the bottom of that you might have an iron pan. And if that's the situation, then it might be that a generation of birch and rowan and species like that are going to be what's needed before you can return the soil to health. Or it may be that you've got a thin brown earth over clay, which would be much more an optimistic scenario. So
yeah, actually, what you're saying about the needles, that does sound like it. So, and the birch is growing really nicely itself. So perhaps that's an interesting thing. Thanks very much for that.
Yeah. Look at your soil and try and find out a bit about forest soils.
David, people are loving your term continuous harvest forestry. Did you coin that term?
That's mine, I'm afraid. Yeah, well, I'm sure.
Yeah, you should trademark it. People are really enjoying it. So Anthony says, I have a 6.4 acre high forest mature sweet chestnut woodland with little understory. I like the idea of a mosaic form of CCF, but you really like CHF as that term, where small and large pockets are felled, a few trees are thinned here and there, a pond added in the woodland. Would you say this is a good form of rich CCF?
It sounds lovely. The whole idea of having overstood chestnut coppice, which is what I imagine it is I just love sweet chestnut. But yeah, it'd be good to get some diversity in there. It might be quite difficult because chestnut will coppice so readily and seed so readily. But I would try and get some species diversity in there. But
what would you recommend if you had to pick 3 extra trees to like diversify with as your first port of call? What would you go with?
I love cherry. I think cherry should always make up, 10% of a woodland. Is great, especially around the edges. Get some blossom in the edges. Oak, sweet chestnut is just such a magnificent timber, isn't it? Oak, all woodland should contain oak, all woodland should contain cherry. A lot of continuous cover forestry has relied on shade tolerant species for obvious reasons. The danger of that is that you get a darker and darker woodland, but possibly beech would be again totally site specific, but beech, oak and cherry, that would be 3 species to add in there.
So Chris asks, is cherry light demanding? I guess
cherry is pretty light demanding. It is.
I got 20 cherry saplings for our anniversary present this year, which I was very pleased about. And put them on the borders actually, so
a great place for cherry.
So Laura says you can apply for a woodland management plan grant with the Forestry Commission. It's £1,000 and use it for training or a consultant. So thanks for sharing that, Laura. Does anybody else have any questions? I think I've tried to go through the questions and pick a fair.
Can I ask a question?
Please do, yeah. Please do, Stuart.
Yeah, so there was just some chat about clear felling, which interested me because I've got Sitka spruce. This is the wood I mentioned earlier near Hoyk, and it's all Sitka spruce with just a margin around it. And at the moment, I'm just trying to fell trees to clear, but this could take ages, a tree at a time. So, and the little bits I have heard about approaching a land agent and getting people in, tend to hear quite a few sort of bad stories about contractors absolutely devastating the wood. So I was just wondering if you have any advice on clear felling.
How old is your woodland, Stuart?
Well, I think the Sitka spruce, that's a good question. I don't actually know. They're about 10 meters, 11 meters high.
Okay.
So
quite young.
yeah,
spruce.
yeah.
And do you want to diversify it? It sounds like gardener's question time, doesn't it? It's really
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's rewilding is very much what I'm into, and I've got various ideas. I'm on the River Teviot as well, so I've got a nice embankment going down there, which I hope to do something with willows. I've got willows growing in my garden at the moment, but yeah, I'm just wondering. I'm getting on a bit, so I don't know if I've got enough time to chop, at the rate of 5 a year or whatever I'm going at the moment.
Yeah, get thinning. It sounds like a young woodland, and it wants thinning. It's the whole contractor thing is really difficult. The commercial timber industry is very much aimed towards smash and grab. It's very difficult to persuade contractors that the crop is the stuff they leave behind rather than the stuff they take away, and buttress damage and things like that. But it sounds like your woodland is ripe for a line thinning. At least take out one line in 7 or one line in 5, something like that, and get a contractor in to do that. And that will need a felling license. You say you're doing the odd tree, but without a felling license, you're pretty limited to what you can do anyway. So yeah, it would probably stand a commercial thinning, but yeah, finding a good contractor is I try and form a relationship with the contractor. Try and find someone you can trust and look after them and try and give them some regular work.
So I think what you're telling me there that's interesting is a contractor might be interested in quite a relatively small piece of work. I mean, I've only got 4.5 acres, so taking out a line wouldn't actually be a huge amount of trees. I'd estimate it'd be about 15 or 20.
Right. So one line, one row in 7 across the site. Yeah, I mean, an organisation that I'm getting involved with is a group called the Land Workers Alliance, and that's a group of a lot of quite young people who are really interested in woodland management. Well, the woody branch of the Land Workers Alliance is the group that you'd want to get in touch with, and there'll probably be someone local to you. Yeah, and the whole idea of who owns woodland and succession, because I'm no longer in the first flush of youth, as is obvious. And yeah, have an interest in who might be going to take over from you and nurture them. That's my plan.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Stuart, in the chat, can you see the chat?
Yeah, I just saw Tony Martin. Yeah, I just scribbled down.
Maybe if you and Alex message each other, you can swap contact details. And Tony seems to have some interesting ideas as well. Maybe if you message and you can chat about that, help each other because you've got similar woodland.
Yeah.
Ian, this is our last question for the last minute. How would you approach deer control in a small 5-acre wood with open boundaries, steep-sided valley with a lot of red deer movement?
The ideal is landscape scale deer management, isn't it? To get involved with your local deer management group and cooperate with local stalkers and have a collaborative effort. We fail completely to do that here. Deer stalkers are a cagey bunch, and they don't naturally cooperate with each other. If you can get neighbors interested the larger the scale of, across the landscape, the better. Yeah, 5 acres is really tricky. I mean, we've got 50 acres of woodland here, and we've got ourselves a rifle, and we shoot 4 or 5 deer a year, and that seems to be enough to control our deer here. But if you've got a lot of deer moving across the landscape, then yeah, try and get your neighbours involved.
Yeah. Well, that brings us to 7 o'clock. David, this method of doing the talk and then doing the questions as like the main body of it, it's worked really well. I think I'm going to nick this as my new format. It's worked really well. So good on you.
Yeah, thanks, mate.
Thank you so much. I think we've all learned stacks tonight, and just thanks so much for being so knowledgeable and so kind to share your time. So on behalf of all of us in SWOG, thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you all for listening to me.
Yeah, and the thanks are just coming flooding in the chat. I don't know if you can see it, David, but yeah, everyone's oh, you're a hit. And do you want to know? We had 55 attendees, so we smashed our target of 42. So well done.
Brilliant organising. Thank you, Sarah.
Right. Well, listen, have a really relaxing evening. You earned it. As always, everybody, keep your eye out for our future SWOG webinars. We've got a few coming up. They'll be advertised on the socials, and of course, they'll always be in the SWOG newsletter. Look for any information from David that we will put in our next SWOG newsletter about woodland management courses. And as always, if you have any questions, sarah@swog.org.uk, message me and I will endeavour to get back to you. Thank you for your support and always coming to our webinars. Catch you all soon. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Cheerio.